Thank you for those that are listening. You're listening to an In My Humble Opinion exclusive called Save the City. That song was very touching there, Charles.
Right.
I just want to live. God save me. There's a message in that. Okay. Charlottesville Tomorrow. You're up. I know y'all got some good questions. Y'all are more technical than the rest of us. We just having a good old time, a little cookout going on here on the radio. But let's get down to the meat and potatoes as to why we're here.
Yeah, Chief Brackney, Jessie here in Charlottesville Tomorrow. I was really interested in the very start when you were speaking about the economy and the maladaptive strategies playing a really big role in a lot of the crime that you're seeing. But I'm curious that you have spent more time and know much more about the actual shootings and the crimes than any of us here that have happened in the last 6 months in Charlottesville, where it's been really skyrocketing. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what you're actually seeing in the crimes that have happened.
So, you can never say what an actual person's motive was for any of those, right? For what moves a person to pull out a high-powered weapon and just start randomly shooting throughout the community. And what moves a person to the type of violence that we've been seeing. So I'm not a psychologist. I can only tell you what the trends look like. One, as Shadee was saying, that there used to be ways in which people handled their disputes and their conflicts. And whether or not we understand that, there were these informal role model ways in which we saw that play out in community, right? There were older folks in the community that almost mediated these conflicts. And, there were these unwritten rules, right, about what you did. So when Shadee was talking about, hey, me and my crew went somewhere else and we just kind of, went at it for a little bit and we went home and life was done, right? There were these unwritten rules. Even when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, you didn't jump anybody. If you jumped somebody, that was considered a punk move, right? Yeah. You just didn't do those kinds of things. It was either a straight 1-on-1 or it was kind of if it was even. But those are the things that you learned about by being around older generations, right? To learn what that looked like and what the culture looked like. Unfortunately, and again, owning this through the policing, we literally gutted an entire generation, 2 and 3 generations of those Black male mentors who were in the community who could have helped with that kind of socialization process on how you handle disputes and how do you handle conflicts. So there's been no persons to say, this is what you do in the community. You don't defile your community. You don't sell drugs to pregnant women who've got babies and they're not feeding. I mean, there were these rules about how you did things. Now, when we have persons who are returning citizens to their communities, the younger folks don't recognize them, nor do they know them. So when we're seeing and nor do they understand or respect the kind of gravitas that they brought with them back in the day, right, as a quote unquote OG, who could easily say this will not go on, and it didn't go on.
Well, Chief Brackney, I know when I came through the system, through the streets and everything, it was no women, no children. They were off limits.
That's right.
It didn't matter if it was a drunk sitting around here. If you did something that went against the community, they showed up at your door. They dealt with you, and
that's right.
I don't want to say, like Shadee said earlier, I'm not advocating and saying that was the way that things need to happen, but it was a different time. You didn't mind.
It was a code.
Yeah, if a kid rode a bike and he got too far down the street, they was like, no, you need to go on back up here. You know what I'm saying? Right. So there were things that, the mass incarceration took from us that.
That's correct. And again, acknowledging it. So what we have to do, real strategies are being very intentional about putting back into the community, bringing into the community, introducing into the community people like Shadee and Home to Hope, right? We need to bring them back into the community. We need to understand and respect and I'm going to shout them out, but we need people like Will in the community. So when he's in the community talking about, getting that fade, he's also infusing that knowledge in how do you maintain. West Bellamy's in the community, right? Who these young folks see and respect. And I can see Mayor Walker coming on to the thing, but those kinds of, we have gutted the community of those potential mentors. So then we have to be intentional about infusing them back into the Jessie, if we see it. So the majority of it is just not an ability to handle their rage, their conflict, their pain. Again, none of us is advocating for violence whatsoever, but you have to understand why somebody might pick up a gun. If you don't have any other way that you think you can cope or manage or exert your influence, you're going to come to what is expedient and what is close.
That's right.
And in Black communities, there's an infiltration of gun violence and guns. I'm sorry, particularly of guns.
Yeah, you were.
It has to be a bit of a challenge for you, because that leads a bit to the trust gap that some people have, that they're not going to normally call the police if something happens, that I'll just take care of it myself. And so you're getting these things, and maybe it's another incident was related to the first one, because people are handling and they're not involving law enforcement in taking care of it in the community.
That's correct. And that's why we need to be careful about our language. When we have people in our own community pitting each other against each other, those persons who are informed, who are influencers, you can't then start taking hits and at people like, city officials who are trying to get something done, right? It's easy to stand on the sidelines and throw darts at people, when the real work is, you don't realize how you undermine a system that is attempting to be created to make communities whole. And I may not be part of that trust system, and that's okay. I don't have to be and shouldn't be, right? There's an important part about that legitimacy, but at least, as I said before, tell somebody else. Call somebody else and say, here's what we think and are afraid is going to happen. Then we can put things in place to disrupt that.
That's right.
And what I mean by disrupt, that doesn't always mean jail. Sometimes just a mere presence of more people in the area will often de-escalate stuff, because people don't want to be seen and don't want to be identified as being part of it. There are so many things that we actually could do, Elliott, that I believe, if given the opportunity to do, we could do here.
I'd like to welcome Mayor Walker on here. Good to see your smiling face. Now, I'm going to jump right into it, because she led, the chief led to a segue that I have to ask you. Yes, we had these people taken out of the communities that could have kind of monitored and let certain things happen, but we also don't have what we used to have, where the doctor lived in our neighborhood, the gas station man lived in our neighborhood, the mechanic lived in our neighborhood. How difficult is it for our community at this point, where most of us don't have the credit that we need to get these businesses or pass the credit check to be able to get there, to be able to go to the city and maybe ask for money to help build up the resources inside of the city?
Is that a question for me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, well, let me start by saying that I don't think all of those people are out of the neighborhood. So I think that's one thing that we have to maybe shift from too. People are close. This community is small. It's really about going back to those principles of where your well-being was my well-being. It's not necessarily that the people are not present. So that's one, I think that's the biggest when we're talking about internally that we have to shift from. We also have to discuss that there are these long-term. So yes, we know that there has been, jobs, opportunities, education. Right. All of those things are things that I campaigned on. I've my entire life, they have been a problem. When we're talking about this particular time in our history, we're talking about how do people who have experienced those problems before, those traumas, have been in those situations, what is changing about where they are to where now people are dying, right? And so that's our immediate fix, is how do we get people who are, who are having a very challenging time, because I'm sitting here now trying to, because I know some of the community wants to say those criminals out there, and I just don't think that. That's just not how my mind works. I think people are having a challenging time, and the way that they are expressing that is what we have to figure out first and foremost, and then we move forward while simultaneously moving towards what I hope we all been working on anyway, is how to stop allowing the system that has been created in Charlottesville for generations to keep destroying people and their families, to where this sense of hopelessness that creates this expression of violence that we're seeing in the community, that stops happening. So there's those immediate things that we need to focus on, and then those things that we should have been focusing all along that we just have to speed up. So that people feel like that we're actually doing something and they have opportunities, and we can't keep expecting people to wait for decades for those opportunities to manifest.
Well, let me ask you this, and Shadee, you probably be a better person that I can answer it, but I don't think I should, because I'm asking questions. When I was out there doing wrong, I knew I was doing wrong, right? So at what point do we take some accountability for those of us that are out there in industries?
But can I answer that before you?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Because this, I just want to make sure that we're having, this accountability piece.
Yes, ma'am.
Some people who are, maybe stronger than other people. We all know that. You can look at their relationships. There are some people who make it out of these systems and it don't totally destroy them and deplete them. And some people that we may be asking to be more accountable, we are usually assuming that they have the ability to be accountable the way that you may have been. And part of helping to heal the community is to leave all the assumptions at the door and meet the individual, whatever that may be, where they are, and figure out what they need and how to give it to them. So that would be my answer to that. And now I'm gonna.
Yeah, no, Mayor Walker, you hit the nail on the head. So I was gonna initially say, like, I'm very cautious not to generalize, like, that everybody's who's Black experience has been the same as mine, right? So even in the work that I do, I recognize that anybody who comes to me or that I'm in a close relationship with, they're an individual, right? Yeah. So I can't expect someone who, some things that could have broke me that didn't might break the next person.
That's true. That's very true.
So they might not have, we were different people. We're made up different, right? The way we think is different, right? Someone who, it took me going to jail on my distribution charges 3 years for it to finally click. You know what I'm saying? It might take somebody else 30 days for it to click. So the accountability factor, I think that has more so to do with individuals once once you know better, you do better. Like there's the expectation of, if you know to do something, now that you're accountable for that. But if you don't see it in your community, if you don't have access to resources, if you've always been given the short end of the stick or given crumbs off the table, like if you put two hungry dogs, starving dogs in a cage, eventually they're going to start going at each other.
Okay. Right? Well, that being said, let me ask y'all this then. If we're looking at it from that lens, Mayor Walker, what can council do to help interject resources into these people? Because at a point, somebody has to be accountable. If we're saying that the people in the neighborhoods that we came through aren't accountable because of circumstances, can we then turn and look at council and say, okay, you have to be held accountable because I don't want to be held accountable? So I know I'm playing devil's advocate right here, but people do ask these questions. And the reason for this particular show is to talk about the things that people won't talk about. So Mayor Walker, my question. I'm sorry.
All the time. I know how you roll. So
And Mayor Walker, I have said to him on more than one occasion, the devil doesn't need an advocate. He's going out there and say what he got to say.
So what I think, and this is the thing, we know that personal accountability piece, you know, if there aren't people in positions of leadership that care about people, then your life doesn't change if you don't take that accountability yourself. So I am not saying that people don't have to take accountability. Just saying of how we talk to people about what that looks like, how we build them up and help them believe that they even have the ability to take that accountability to make some of those changes. We have to change the way we address them and talk to them in the first place.
Is council having this conversation about helping though?
Yeah, I think we have been, maybe not everybody, but I definitely, if I'm just gonna.
Yes, ma'am.
I think Councilor Bellamy, you know, if we're talking about the last two council and Councilor Elworts, you know, all of us, and we're on here speaking primarily to, you know, Black audience, then we were very invested because we understood what was needed in the community to shift those resources. We're talking about council's responsibility. There's never been a time in history where government hasn't played a role in creating some of the disparities that we have at this moment. So for any of us to say we're not responsible or accountable, it should be unacceptable to us all. There's no way that we are not responsible. And so, yes, we have to do our part too. And it's a major part, and it has to be major investments. One of my biggest fears at this time is what happens when you go through depressions, Great Recessions, Great Depressions, right? Who gets the short end of the stick there? And if we end up where we do not prioritize making sure people are not in a worse position, which was already bad in this community, it was horrible, than they were before the pandemic, we are really going to fail people. And trying to dig out of a deeper hole filled with disparities is going to take decades, and not just 10 years or 20 years. We're talking about 50, 100 years. And every day when I wake up, whenever I can go to sleep to wake up, I am thinking about how to fix that, and the role that the position that I currently have, how can I use my influence to make sure that even if I'm not here, that there is some accountability that we can hold the next set of leadership to, and that there is a clear kind of blueprint for where we need to go. And there have been enough conversations that people know that if we don't do it, we are not going to be surprised by what the stats look like in the coming years, and the devastating toll it's going to take on our most vulnerable community members.
Okay, I want to go ahead and take another break. I really want to come back this last 35 minutes and talk about personally, what can we do to change the narrative as to what's going on? Because reporting on it doesn't seem to be enough. Just locking people up doesn't seem to be enough. So what can we do as a community from A to Z to try to help change the narrative? This is an In My Humble Opinion exclusive. We'll be right back.